There we go. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us today from wherever you are in the world. And before I get to mention, if you want to send some comments over telling us where you're listening from today or just throughout the episode or the interview with Francesca, leave comments or whatever little nice things you want to say, please feel free to do so. And they'll pop up on the screen so everyone can see. So please be nice. So thanks for joining us. This is our fourth series for celebrating women in diving. And today we are speaking with Francesca Trotman. And before we get started, I just want to give a little short bio on who she is, and then we're going to get right into it. But Francesca Trotman is the managing director and founder of Love the Oceans. She's an avid diver for over 15 years. She's a passionate ocean advocate with a special interest in fisheries. So we're going to talk a lot about that today and how she's working in that in Mozambique. Results-oriented, Francesca constantly encourages people to consider conservation in everyday life and take a greener approach to modern living. She oversees the majority of the programs in country and spends her time split between the UK and Mozambique. She is the recipient of the Ocean Award in the Young Initiative category in recognition of Love the Ocean's work. Congratulations, Francesca, on that. She is currently completing her PhD remotely with Newcastle University. She's a commission member of the International Union for the Conservation of Nature Species Survival Commission. Is there an acronym for that one? Marine Fishes Red List Authority. A member of the Species Survival Commission's Youth Professional Group and a member of University of Leeds Biology Advisory Board. I'm glad that I read that because
get the mouthful. Sorry.
So welcome, Francesca. For those listeners today, this is a really special session that we're going to have. We're going to cover some really interesting topics. So if you're at all interested in how the importance of marine protected areas to local communities, how that impacts food security, how gender equality impacts that, or how that's an integral part of a marine protected area and a resilient local economy, local blue economy, the importance of community outreach and stakeholder engagement and just engaging the community in the importance of these things through education, through even teaching the youth how to swim and helping them empower them to be future leaders of an MPA. So all of these things we're going to talk about today because that's really what Francesca's doing with Love the Oceans. It's really beautiful work, and I think if anything, you'll walk away completely inspired with a deeper understanding of how all of these things are connected and the importance of focusing on these areas to have marine protected areas and to help build stronger communities around the world and why all these different factors matter. So thank you, Francesca.
Thanks
tell
for
us where you're thank you for joining us. So tell us where you're calling in from today.
I'm calling in from my lovely little straw hut in Mozambique. The beach is like just outside. I'm calling you from inside just because it's a bit windy today, so it'd be better with the mic. But from our base in Jangamo, which is in the south of Mozambique. So this is where I kind of spend 6 months of my life and where the organization is based permanently. So this is my home and half my home, I guess.
You do half the year in the summer in the UK, does it not matter? You can't choose.
I messed it up, and I have winter in both hemispheres.
You do?
So, yeah. My argument for that is that the winter here is still really warm and we have the best wildlife in winter. It's whale season at the moment, so we have humpback whales like left, right and center, and they'll only get more intense in the next couple of months. So I actually prefer winter here than summer. And then in the UK, there's not really any saving that one. but in Mozambique, the winter's great.
Nice holidays. I know. That was actually my next question, is just painting that picture of, I know you have a lot of humpback whales, what you just said, but there's also amazing other marine animals there that actually I think was kind of instrumental in bringing you there in the first place. Can you talk for all that? Because we obviously have divers listening from all over the world and divers that want to come to Mozambique. So talk about a little bit of that marine ecosystem, about the flora and fauna that you would encounter there where you live right now.
Yeah, definitely. So Well, I originally came here for underwater photography, so that was kind of like my, because I do that as a third job, yay. And yeah, so I originally came to Mozambique for like just the kind of wildlife and the diving aspect of Moz, and we're really lucky here. We have some really beautiful animals. Just the other day they had a massive frogfish on the dive, which I know isn't like super crazy to talk about, but I love frogfish. So that was super cool. But we have a lot of sharks,
What's the
which was
dive
my
symbol for
initial.
frogfish? I don't remember. What's
Our one is this, but
yeah?
I think dive centers around the world have
Why is it that?
their different frogfish. So
Why did you pick that
I
one?
don't really know. It's just
I
like
thought they
that's
should have
just
eyeballs or something, or
what
frog.
everyone does.
Okay, so great. So
Yeah.
you saw that,
I
and then
feel
what
like it
else?
should be like an anglerfish signal or something.
Yes. Yeah, that.
Um, yeah. So sharks were like my initial gateway species into marine biology. So that's like we're really lucky here. We have like whale sharks, and we have all your kind of typical sharks as well. As well as like guitarfish and wedgefish and lots of different other types of demersal species. So a huge range of elasmobranchs. We've also got like manta rays as well, both species, and a ton of different rays, which we've actually had loads of luck with recently. We've had a lot of mobuluscals, which has been really cool. So yeah, very lucky with the wildlife here, which is really amazing.
Keep in balance there.
What was that, sorry?
I said lots to protect and keep in balance. Yes.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
tell us, you just mentioned a little bit, but you came there originally because of your love of sharks, right? Or something about protecting
Yeah.
sharks?
So when I first came here, I was very young. I was 19, so I was a baby. And no offense to any 19-year-olds out there. And so basically I came here for photography initially, but I was also second year marine biology at the time at University of Southampton in the UK. And as I said, sharks were kind of like my species, my thing, that I was a weird kid when everyone else was like, obsessing over normal teenage stuff. I was drawing sharks and like obsessed with sharks and watching David Attenborough and learning about the shark fin trade. So sharks were like my real like entry into the marine world, my initial fascination. And then when I first came here, I saw sharks being killed in the nets, which I'd learned about the shark fin trade like in books and like documentaries, but obviously it's quite different seeing that happen in real life. So I was very young and emotional, so it was like, oh, this is such a bad thing, and like I couldn't really understand it fully. I knew that I wanted to learn more about it, so I at the time I was in my second year marine biology. I was doing an integrated masters, which you can do in the UK, which essentially means, and you can probably do in the US and loads of other countries, but essentially at the university I was at means you don't reapply for your master's year, you can do it all in one big lump. So then that was the summer of my second year. I went into my third year and found some research assistants, came back to Mozambique at the end of my third year to collect my master's thesis data on the shark fisheries. And then I spent 4 months with a shark fisherman, really learning about what the shark fin trade is here and why it happens. And that was really eye-opening for me. Like, I was very naive. I was very young, so I had a lot to learn in the world, still do. Every day is a school day, but I was very young and very naive. So spending that time with the fisherman was really, really important for me to be able to learn the actual socioeconomic side of the fin trade and shark fishing, which I had zero appreciation for before and just didn't have any knowledge on. And at the time as well, that was, not that old, but that was like 10, 11 years ago. And a lot of the rhetoric around the shark fin trade didn't take into the account the socioeconomic side of it when we look at like the documentaries filmed back then and stuff like that. So my exposure to that kind of thing was very minimal. And now with my career now, wind forward 10 years, that's actually what I'm most interested in. I'm really, really interested in that interface between humans and the ocean, and what that means for food security and the future of the human race and the future of the marine ecosystem, and how both parties can win. but yeah, so at the time it was all about kind of the sharks and the shark fishing, and then I wrote my master's on that, and then basically got the results you would think in terms of the shark fin trade, i.e. not sustainable, and possible detrimental effect to the local marine ecosystem. And it was something that I felt like I couldn't just walk away from. I couldn't just write the thesis and go, right, done, kind of thing, continue with life. So I started Love the Oceans, which, so it started off very kind of sharky, very fisheries related. It is still very heavily fisheries, but we now cover a lot of different things. And when I started that, I was at university. That was in November 2014. So we're just coming up to our 10-year anniversary, but we only really started like on the ground work in 2015. I literally graduated and stepped on a plane 2 days later. And Pascal, our community outreach manager, I met him from through, he was the brother of a friend of mine. A lot of Love the Oceans. And I think a lot of things in life is like, you get that like, I don't want to say luck, but like it is kind of like situational, and then you work your ass off to make it into something. So I met Pascal, and we got on really well, and he's only a year older than me, so we were both really, really young at the start. By this point, I think I'm 21 at this point, and he's 22. And when you're that young, I think you're really aware that you just don't know everything, and that there's so much to learn in the world. And I think that's a big reason as to why Love the Oceans has grown the way it has so organically, because I think being so young, when someone says, oh, this won't work, or this, have you thought about it from this angle, or like, you know, the elders have said, like, you know, we think this could work better, or this way, or from experience this should work, you're kind of very open to taking on all of that kind of influence. And then we were really lucky as well. Andrea, our director, came on board. She actually volunteered with the organization and then joined full time, and she'd worked in like contracts and like more like business side of things, which is a 21-year-old and 22-year-old who, and we both had zero experience in business. We then had this third skill set that we could bring in. And then it kind of evolved from there. So Pascal developed more of the outreach side of what we do, and I developed a lot more of the marine research of what we do. So now we do a heap of different things. Do you want me to run through what we do quickly?
Well, real quick, before you get into like the actual projects and your approach to conservation, can you give a little bit more, like, what is your vision of Love the Oceans? I'm assuming that what it was 10 years ago, now it's maybe expanded, but what is your ultimate goal? And like, kind of tell us a little bit, like, how big it is, and like, what does it look like? You know, like, tell us a bit. I mean, it's a nonprofit. Yeah. So let's start there, and then let's dive into the details.
Yeah, so we actually have two entities. We have a nonprofit and a charity. So I originally set up the nonprofit because I kept being told by people that charities are so much paperwork. Scrap that. If you're looking at doing this yourself, just set it up as a charity. It's a lot easier. So anyone that says it's a lot of paperwork has never written a grant application in their life. So we set up as a nonprofit, and we do, pre-pandemic, we funded stuff as kind of like tours. So we ran like expeditions, student expeditions that could come out, get experience, do their thesis with us. We still do that. Now it's building back post-pandemic a lot. But so basically initially set up like that. Then we registered the charity because a lot of grants needed a charity number to be able to, you know, trust that the money's going to the right place and all that kind of stuff. And very slowly our team grew. And I mean, we've been going 10 years. So when I say slowly, it is very slowly. There's still only 7 of us. We are a tiny team. And our mission changed. I should have said that. Our mission changed. So obviously it started really sharky and really fishery related. And that's still an important part. But now when you encompass all the other things that need to happen to be able to eliminate the shark fin trade, for instance, but also when you look at all the other different elements that come into a successful marine ecosystem, successful marine conservation, and the socioeconomic side of it, we changed the mission to establish this area as a marine protected area, and a locally led one at that. And that's because the research informs the legislative backbone. So that gives you your regulations, what you can fish, what you can't fish, what types of fishing you should use, what activities should be allowed, at what limits, all of that kind of stuff. You're going to get that from the science that you're collecting. That's great. But when it comes to the socioeconomic side of things, for a long time, top-down MPAs have been popular, where government, implements something, especially because of, international agreements, international commitments that everyone's committing at different meetings, left, right, and centre, and the pressure on the world to protect 30% of the ocean by 2030, all of that kind of stuff. There's a lot of pressure right now to protect MPAs, to protect the ocean. But often that does not utilize local voices, local knowledge, Indigenous people that live in those areas and have their best interests at heart. And being able to have a locally led marine protected area or a co-managed marine protected area means that you can incorporate the needs of the local people to ensure that you have a successful MPA. And there's science that says that incorporation of local views, of local knowledge of the local people, equals a more successful MPA. You increase compliance, you increase actual success of the conservation, like you can actually measure the ecology of it too. So it makes sense to involve the local community. And so we have our organization now is pretty much split in half between the research and the outreach. Yeah.
I was going to say real quick before, because I think what you just said is really important, because you said a top-down approach and you're employing a bottom-up community-led approach, which, just for the listeners out there, I think sometimes when people hear about conservation and they hear these words, they don't always understand what they mean, because we throw them around, I think, a lot because we're either in the industry or working on it. But I think what we're going to talk about today is really, that's what your focus is, and that's the difference. And maybe you could just spend like one more moment talking about the difference between those two things, just so it helps people understand like what your nonprofit, your charity, what you guys are doing is different than what a top-down approach is, and how important that is.
Yeah. So generally speaking, a top-down approach is implemented by higher up legislation. So that could be your government declaring a marine protected area, national park, any kind of environmental legislation. And that, technically the management system can really be anything. Often it's centrally managed, which means that it's managed by the government and not managed by the local community. Whereas a bottom-up approach is usually, so a top-down approach, you would create the laws and people just have to abide by them, and that's the law. So that happens all over the world. I'm sure people have had it, happen quite close to them in their country, whoever's listening. Laws are implemented, that's just what you have to abide by. A bottom-up approach is where those bylaws, those laws are developed with the local community in mind. So a bottom-up approach is often initiatives led by the local community. So it's by the local community for the local community, with the idea and end goal still of improved ecology of the area. So the idea should be improved ecology when you're talking about, marine protected areas, improved biodiversity, but also improved welfare for the local community. So things like, if you made an MPA and it was a no-take zone MPA, that means you can't remove any fish at all. That's not feasible for our area, because literally everyone relies on the ocean for a primary protein source. So if you were to eliminate fishing as a source of food, you would end up with serious malnourishment in our community. So it's not an option. So you've got to think like that. You've got to think like, okay, well, that's not an option. What is the middle step here? So that's allowing some types of fishing and moving away from other types of fishing. So you can have fishing, but it's sustainable fishing. And then how is that managed? Well, that needs to be managed by the local community. So the fishermen need to patrol that themselves. And the way that you're going to be able to do that is through education. So then that's when your ocean literacy comes into it, and the education pieces become so integral. So the reason that bottom-up approaches have often not been invested in the past, and it's something that's becoming more and more popular now and people are waking up, is because of the level of work involved. It's a lot harder because it's a lot more of a long game. You're investing in human behavior change, you're investing in education, you're investing in generational change, which takes a hell of a lot longer to do than just creating a law and going, like it or lump it, you've got to abide by it. So but studies have shown that it's more successful in the long run. So it can be much better to go that route.
Thanks for that. I think that was super helpful. That was a great explanation. I think this is a good segue to talk about your sustainable fishing approach with gillnet versus kayak fishing and how that's helping change the marine ecosystem there.
Yeah, so basically with the I'll just flip quickly back to the research side, because that project, so we have our sustainable fishing project, and that project is a really great example of what we've just been talking about. So it's informed by science, which a lot of conservation should be evidence-based. So you need to have that biological data to really understand what's happening in your environment. So we collect fisheries data, as I mentioned before, but we've expanded from just the sharks, which is what I initially was interested in, into all fish. So there you're talking about like the types of fishing as well as what actually is being caught. And when we talk about what's actually being caught, we're talking about, yes, the species, but also the size of the species, and also what we call the trophic level. Trophic level being where that fish fits in the food web. Is it a herbivore? Is it a carnivore? Is it an apex predator? And that information combined, so that's your information about what you're taking out of the ocean. Then you need to know what's actually still in there. So that's where our coral reef surveys are really important. Understanding what fish are still alive. So the coral reef surveys, we collect the actual data on what is on the bottom of the ocean. So how percentage cover of your corals, other like competitors to corals, what substrate the coral, if there is coral, what substrate the coral is attached to, how much bare rock there is, that kind of stuff. Because coral colonizes bare rock. So bare rock will give you an idea of what the potential is for the area for the coral, things like that. But we also collect associated reef species. So we also understand what is happening in terms of the fish that live on that reef, what the herbivore carnivore balance is looking like, all of that kind of information. And when you combine that as well with our baited remote underwater video studies, so that is really looking, because it's baited, it's meat, that's looking at your carnivore species. So a lot of the fish living on the reef should be herbivore species, because they hang out and they're residential, so you'll get them a lot on your reef surveys. Then your BRUV data, your beta remote underwater videos, your BRUV data, and that's the photo in the bottom right there with a little baby tiger. That's your apex predators and what we call your meso predators, which is your level just below your sharks. So that's still your carnivore species, so your tunas, your barracudas, your king mackerels, like those big meaty fish that are actually pretty tasty as well. So those two data sets are really giving you an idea of what's still in the ocean, and then your fisheries data set is giving you an idea of what we're taking out of the ocean. And that's really important because those two data sets intersect, right? And that's where our sustainable fishing project comes in. So the fisheries data is showing us that the netting, which is in that photo on the right hand side there, is collecting a lot of apex predators and a lot of herbivores. And when you look at the ecosystem breakdown, that's really problematic because apex predators predate on carnivore species. So if they're not there anymore, your carnivore species numbers are going to explode. And if your carnivore species are exploding, what they predate on is going to become overpredated, and that's your herbivores. On top of the herbivores being overpredated, you've also got the nets catching loads of them. So you've got them being overpredated by the fish in the ecosystem, but also the humans. So then the herbivores are doctors of the reef. They are super, super, super important to our coral reef. So the lack of them is unbelievably worrying. Like, I cannot describe how scary it is to not have herbivores on a reef. And it's the numbers now are so low, according to our coral reef research, that when we see a parrotfish, for example, on a dive, we're like, oh my gosh, parrotfish, like, oh my gosh, yay, like, go and make babies kind of thing. Whereas in a normal place, in an area with less degradation, divers would be like, why are you excited about a parrotfish? Yeah, the herbivores are really, really important, and the coral reef data is showing that there's basically none left. So when you think about, okay, what does that mean? That means that without the herbivores, the doctors are gone. That means the reefs are going to be getting ill. So that means that you're going to need to start looking at things like disease and things like that, which is another data set I'm going to talk about in a minute in a bit more depth. But the Sustainable Fishing Project, and that really comes into the kind of co-management, community side, and the socioeconomic side of what we're talking about. Ideal world, you just eliminate well, actually, you just eliminate fishing in general and leave the ocean to recover, right? No take zones are a great idea in principle, to leave the ocean and let it recover. Yes, that's great. That's a lovely idea. But realistically, 3 billion people in the world rely on fish, like as a primary protein source. That's not going to happen. And in our area, it's certainly not going to happen. If you try and implement that, people will continue to fish. They're just going to do it illegally. And you're going to push people further into a poverty cycle, and it's just going to get worse and worse. So it's not a feasible option to completely eliminate fishing. What you want to do is look at the types of fishing and what they're collecting. So when you look more closely at the fisheries data set, you can see that kayak fishing collects a completely different species. So kayak fishing, you're on a boat, right? That means that you're going to be going further out to sea. With the net fishing, people just swim nets out here. And our area is a wild coastline. It's called the Wild Coast for a reason. We have crazy currents, which means when fishermen don't have the capital to invest in a boat, which is most of the time, we live below the poverty level here. So that means they're swimming their nets out, and that means they're dumping them in pretty shallow water, because you're not going to lug a net out for miles and miles to sea when you're just swimming. And that means that they are dumping those nets on, 6 meters of water, and that's your residential species. Your pelagic means like blue water swimming species like tuna. They're not going to come in that close to shore.
And repeatedly over and over again in the same areas.
Same areas. So you're just continuously fishing coral reefs, essentially, like the residential species, which happen to be herbivore, that live on coral reefs. So whereas you compare that with kayak fishing, you're on a boat, you are fishing with a rod and a line and a hook on the end. So that means that you are being much more selective with what you're fishing, because you've got bait on that hook, and fish that are attracted to bait are going to be meat eaters. So you're immediately targeting your carnivore species, which predate on those herbivores. On top of that, you're not fishing with a net. Nets are terrible because they catch everything that swims into them. That's why they're catching apex predators as well as herbivores, as well as some carnivores occasionally. And that's a major part of that problem, is how unselective they are. Whereas a kayaking, you don't accidentally catch a manta on a kayak. Like, mantas aren't attracted to bait hooks like that, and it's a manageable type of fishing that you can eliminate your bycatch, what we call bycatch, accidentally catching stuff. You can eliminate your bycatch by netting. So if you can transition fishermen away from unsustainable fishing like gill netting through to kayak fishing, then that's the way to transition the fishermen over to a different type of fishing, where they can still harvest fish, they can still earn an income, but they can do so sustainably and ensure that there's enough fish in the ocean for their children and their children's children.
Francesca, is there ever pushback? Can a kayak fisherman catch as much fish? Like, is it a longer process? Is there pushback because they're saying, well, I can't catch as much fish doing that? And how do you educate them or convince them with a compelling argument that that's better?
Yeah, so this is a ever evolving project, and it's our most ambitious one by a long way. So I can give you the answer now. It'll probably be different in a year's time. Okay. So right now, what we did is we started with interviews and all the rest of it with the fishermen to check that this was something that would have traction. The fishermen signed a contract which essentially said that they would commit to giving up their nets while we commit to providing the kayaks. We also built a kayak storage space, and bought all the equipment and everything they needed, and also provided all the sustainability workshop and methods workshop, like how to get in a kayak, how to surf waves, because we have short breaks, so you have to go through the waves on kayaks and stuff. All of that kind of information, like the practical side of it. Through that, like, we had some of the fishermen sign up, some of them didn't sign up. And now it's really about behavior change. So we're now getting pressure, like socioeconomic pressure from the rest of the society, who want to expand that project into another bay with different fishermen, but we can't do that until the first bay has everyone's signed up. So now there's that added social pressure. And then there's economic incentives, right? So we worked out the finances. You earn exactly the same amount of money from kayaking as you do netting in terms of the amount of fish you harvest, but you're harvesting better fish from the kayaking. In an ideal world, the economics would have shown that you earn more money from kayaking, because then everyone would have switched without question. Alas, that is not quite the case. So that project, the next steps are meeting with government and having the government implement penalties for nets and limiting where the nets can be placed. So basically the fishermen will be allowed to fish in a certain area with nets, and once that area is dead, which it will become dead within like 6 months, if it's just one small area, then that's it. They can't do anything else with the nets. They can't move away with the nets. So that will eventually push the remaining fishermen, or at least that's what the community thinks, over onto the kayak fishing. And right now we're not concerned with overconsumption through kayaks, because the rate of fishing is just not high enough. There's not enough individuals in the area. There's not enough. The fishing effort would not be enough to exhaust the fish stock. And the BRUV project will give us essentially constant feedback on how many carnivorous species are still in the area. So we'll know whether that is successful or not.
Before we move on to like the next, I guess, part of your approach for Love the Oceans, I just want to go back for a second, because you talked about research and data collection. And I know that's like essential, like that's a critical part of your project, is, you know, establishing that baseline understanding of what's happening. And just because I want to bring it back a little bit to the people that are listening that are divers, and I think you can join you, right, and like participate and kind of do some training with you to help participate in some of the citizen science. But we at PADI talk about this constantly as part of, you know, as a diver, you have the superpower, we call it a superpower, that you can save the oceans through engaging in citizen science. So learning about the ocean and then getting underwater and taking some type of action, hopefully trained action to do something good for the ocean, like what you're doing. So how important is like the citizen science approach, and how is all the data you're doing, is it typically always people diving, or does it vary depending on I guess means they're free diving, snorkeling, people just, you know, going underwater with a slate pencil. So what's exactly happening there, and how
it's a mix. Yeah, it's a mix. So my recommendation would be to check out what projects are going on locally wherever you're diving, and see what you can get involved with. Diving with a purpose is like one of my favorite things. Like I obviously love diving recreationally just to see the pretty animals too. Right. And that's a rare luxury for me these days. But I do love diving with like a purpose. And for us, like even I think I've got some photos here. Yeah, even our coral disease project here, this started with just diving recreationally and general observations of the area. And since then we've dove a lot deeper into this. But this project very much started with kind of swimming around and noticing some funky things going on with the coral and being like, what on earth is going on? And there's so many projects like Dive Against Debris. There's so many different stuff you can get involved with that is really, really great. And citizen science, there is so much to be said for it, because the ocean needs everyone. You don't have to be a marine biologist to be doing this. This is not rocket science by any stretch of the imagination. Marine biologists that don't have good diving skills are much less useful than people who have great diving skills and no science background. So you've got to make sure that you can give what you can give. It doesn't matter if you're an accountant, if you're a lawyer, like everyone, the ocean needs everyone and needs everyone now. So taking action where you can is really, really important, whether that's physically underwater diving or whether, like, you're an accountant, you're a lawyer, you're a social media manager, whatever. the ocean needs everyone in every kind of realm.
Yeah.
Because, you know, marine NGOs, they need accountants, they need lawyers, they need all of those people. So making sure that you can add your skills where you see fit and where you also what you know floats your boat, excuse the pun, but floats your boat, and you know that makes your heart sing. That's where you're kind of, you can interconnect those two worlds too. So definitely getting involved as much as you can in those citizen science projects is really, really important. And often there'll be basic training that you can go through as well, that will bring you up to speed on exactly what data you need to collect and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, definitely would recommend that.
So do you want to walk us through what we're looking at here as far as what you discovered with the coral?
Yeah. So we started a project a few years ago with University of Leeds, and that's the top 3 photos there. So this one is really looking at disease. So the first project with Leeds, we were looking at coral growth and mortality. So it wasn't specifically disease that we were looking at, but more just like general living and death. So you can see a ruler in one of those photos. Basically, we would dive and monitor over 450 colonies like this. This is one colony. And we essentially measure it on a yearly basis, see how much it grows, see how much it dies, and log that. And that's at various different spots and various different depths. So we can kind of monitor the environmental factors that are influencing that. And what we did notice going through it was the disease spreading. So this is the same coral colony on different years, 3 different years, 2022, 2023, and 2024. This is one of the diseases that we is super, super prolific in the area. And you can see how it started on the left-hand side with just that kind of little squiggle and has slowly grown. And then this one, 2024, was taken 2 weeks ago. And you can see the whole bottom part there is pretty much gone, which is really alarming. And this disease is just spreading prolifically. And this is just one of 3 major ones that we have. So just below there, you've got this big, lovely plate coral, this table coral, which in the next photo with the arrow pointing towards it, that's it dead. And that's 2022 is the very healthy looking, lovely coral. And now that's 2024, the same coral completely dead. 2023's photo looked more or less the same. So it died within the period of 2022 to 2023. And then the third disease that we're looking at is this one, tramatodiasis, on the right-hand side, bottom right, which is actually a parasitic worm. I call it pink pom-pom disease because it feels much less intimidating. But between these diseases, to give you an idea of how prolific these are, we had 430 recorded colonies with these diseases on 8 dive sites. So in 15 dives, that amount of data was recorded.
Are you attributing this to the loss of the doctor fish, like the herbivore fish on the reef? Is that one of the causes, or not? Still trying to figure that out.
One of the causes, yeah. So it's going to be, we're still very much figuring it out. And the next step of this project is really taking cuttings to be able to genetically identify the diseases, and then therefore what can be done to reduce them or hopefully eliminate them and hopefully save the corals before it's too late. But I mean, the 3 big factors really, 2 big factors, the herbivores are linked to one of them, is your overfishing and your climate change. So what we want to do right now, and one of the projects that I'm going to set my intern, is looking through all of the dive logs. So I think a lot of divers don't realize how much data they're actually collecting just going scuba diving and wearing their dive computer. You've got a dive log of your temperature of that dive, and at like literally just giving that information, you can monitor bottom temperature and the temperature changes in the ocean over a long period of time. So what we're going back and doing now is logging the literally recreational divers, not even citizen scientists. This is just like holiday makers on their holiday, going back and logging everyone's bottom temperature over the last, let's say, 6 years. You can get a really good idea of fluctuations in water temperature and what effect climate change and ocean warming is having on corals. On top of that, we have a smart sea surface temperature buoy that we're going to chuck in the water and get, proper recordings as well. But that's not giving us a historic database. We can use satellite remote data to give us the historic database, but obviously getting local data is much more accurate. So we want to be able to utilize everyone's dive computers over the last little while and look at how much, because the fact that like this plate coral, for instance, has just died in 1 year insinuates that there could have been a specific heating event that happened within that period and mess things up. The disease definitely is herbivore related. There's a possibility, and one of the projects we want to look at is looking at plastics as a pathogen, microbial vessel and a pathogen vessel, because it's known that diseases can be carried on plastic around the world. And unfortunately, we're on the edge of the Indian Ocean garbage patch. We have a plastic project which is about removing plastic from the ocean and upcycling it into different things. And that's fabulous, but sometimes the damage is already done if it's in the ocean. And I think with plastics, the main kind of rhetoric that is talked about around plastics is like choking, ingestion, stranglement of corals, all of that kind of stuff, but no one talks about the diseases that can come with those corals and be brought from one place to another, invasive species as well. So that's another possibility of where these diseases have come from and why it's so prolific. We're only going to know it through more research. So this project has, exactly, and now it's very time sensitive now as well, which is scary because
I hate to like get all doom and gloom, but I know you said there's a short, very, very short window that you're looking at. And can you tell us what happens what is the worst case scenario that you're looking at right now?
Worst case scenario is literally loss of our corals in our area completely. And what's scary about that is not actually the loss. Obviously, the loss of the corals is scary. But the thing is that most of our team is Mozambican, and most of our team live here, born here, raised here, have family here, have kids. And with the loss of corals, you will lose food security in this area because coral reefs are the nursery ground for all of your commercially important species. So that is your fish that people are reliant on to eat every single day here. So your protein source will vanish. And that is a really, really important part of people's diets. So you're going to end up with people leaving the area because there'll be no food left. And you're going to be left with like the youngsters going out and working in the cities and the older generation kind of resting up here, and a lot more malnourishment. And it's really scary stuff. Like we try not to get too into it in our staff meetings because it is quite triggering for our staff to kind of sit there and have to think about, what this means for the future of their community. I mean, literally 20 minutes before this call, Mario, he's our storyteller. He's actually doing his PADI DM at the moment, and he'll be the first Mozambican qualified DM in our area, in our district, which is very exciting. But he's also our storyteller, and he wants to be an underwater storyteller as well and do marine biology and all the rest of it. But he's just finished a film that he's made in Batonga, which is the local dialect. And given that 50% of people in our area, or 50% of men in our area, are illiterate and 75% of women, he's done this film in Batonga, which is the local dialect, so people don't need to speak Portuguese. He's done it as an audio thing, so people don't need to read to be able to understand it. And he's filmed everything locally and voiced it over himself about these issues and the way that the ecosystem is shifting and the loss of fish and what that means for future generations, with the intention to show this at community meetings in schools and stuff like that. So it's really amazing to see like the action that our staff are quickly taking to be able to try and educate people about these issues, and move away from things like net fishing and damaging activities like that. So yeah, this is tough.
There's so many directions I want to go on, but
yeah.
First, before we get into, because I do want to get into gender, so the work you're doing in gender equality and also like the whole approach to teaching the communities to swim, men and women, and the youth, and then also just women, engaging them in the work, in the local work. But before we go there, how do you remain optimistic, and what are you hoping the solution is? Like, what are you hoping the outcome will be, and what are you kind of working towards, knowing that is a possibility?
How do we stay positive? That's a big question. I think a lot of people have different answers. Personally, I'm a very good person at just putting something behind a door and closing it and thinking, well, I'm not going to think about that right now. So I'm quite good at compartmentalizing. I have been my whole life. But also, like, I think with our organization, we have a very kind of day-to-day existence in terms of, like, we do staff meetings every day, we plan the next day. And then we have a separate board where we talk about the projects and what needs to be pushed forward to be able to move the projects forward. We call it our micro and our macro board. So our micro board is telling us, like, what we need to do on a daily basis. Our macro board is telling us how we move forward on each project in order to make progress within the marine conservation mission that we have. And on that board, we have things like, you know, I've got to have a meeting with this person, we've got to do this educational workshop, and then we can bring over stuff from that board into the micro board as well. So for us, our team likes planning and being able to set realistic goals. So whilst everyone is fully aware that there's a possibility, hope is a very powerful tool and a very powerful motivator. And being able to have that hope that we can change this before it's too late is really, really important. And I think we've seen that with Mario and his video and how seriously he's taken this issue, and all of our other stuff as well, but his is like the most recent thing that's happened. Yeah, I think that's really how we stay motivated, that we have the power to do something about this, and we actually have the tools to do it too. Often it's, you know, down to funding of projects and stuff, but we actually can do something about it. And I think that's the big motivator for our team.
I mean, obviously we're talking about your specific marine ecosystem, but what's happening there in Mozambique in your specific area can literally, this is a process that can happen anywhere. So, right. So whatever what you're learning here can technically be applied in so many different areas. So if someone sees how you're approaching this problem, it can be scaled or like used in other areas. So I think if, you know, for people listening today, and like, hopefully they're listening to this and saying, oh, maybe they're learning something too that's applicable to helping their marine ecosystem. Going back to storytelling and education and community outreach, a big piece of that is, you know, future generations and what you're doing with that whole thing. Can we go into how you're engaging the community and then move into the whole?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Yeah, I think like the easy way to talk about this is that we've talked a lot about like how coral reefs affect food security, and how like the crux of the issue really is like where humans and the ocean interact. And I think that's really where our gender equity and ocean outreach, like educational outreach, has really come into its own. So when you think about like the kind of what I would call the traditional fisheries, so we're talking about like the net fishing, the kayak fishing, all of that kind of stuff, that is your traditional protein harvesting. One of the types of protein that is harvested from the sea at very, very low levels right now are mussels and oysters, so shellfish. And there's the potential in our area. We're really lucky. We have a lot of natural spat growth. Spat's like the baby mussels. So much so that it outcompetes each other as it gets older and actually just falls off the rock and dies. So if we can actually take that and grow that in the ocean to full size, people can harvest that at full size mussels. So you are then creating another protein source from the ocean. And mussel harvesting is actually very sustainable. It's very good for water quality, all of that kind of stuff. It's also a female-led business, which is kind of coincidental. When we floated this idea, we didn't even have to bring it to community meetings as like women's led project, because there's always the risk of a husband turning around and going, I don't want my wife to run a business. We didn't have to do that. We just pitched it as a mussel and shellfish farming project. And mussels and shellfish have always been harvested from the intertidal zone on the rocks by women. So it wasn't even like a question around what gender would be doing that harvesting. It was just, that's a women's project. So
is the men fishing and then they're doing that? Is that more or less like the gender role of the community? Economics?
So that was like a relatively easy introduction into, okay, well, maybe shellfish farming is something that can happen here. But if we're going to do that, okay, right, we're going to harvest the mussels off the rocks. They're going to have to be grown in the open ocean. That means to actually harvest them, you're going to need to have to swim. You're going to need to have to get into the water to be able to pull those mussels off the ropes and be able to actually bring them back to shore. And so we basically did 300 surveys with local women to understand the different issues that women face related to their health, related to menstrual cycles, all that kind of stuff, barriers that stop women interacting with the ocean. And from those surveys, 4 women came forward and said, look, we're really interested in working on this shellfish project that you're talking about. Can we chat more, basically? And some of those women are in this photo here. So this is actually 2 different projects which we combined in this photo. So standing up there, you got Bento, who's our swimming instructor. So he did his swimming instructors a couple of years ago now. And he was training these lovely ladies to swim. And you've got Leonora, who's the second in from the right, hopefully, if the screen is the right way around on whoever's watching this. But the second in from the right, and she is actually illiterate and she doesn't speak Portuguese. She is actually a great example of involving the most inaccessible people in society and how important it is. She has been so keen and one of the really like motivators in the group to be able to push this project forward. She wants to go through a literacy program this year. We're applying for funding for that at the moment. And basically these women, the first step in that project is really learning to swim. From there, learning to use kayaks so that they can actually get out to the mussels. From there, harvesting the mussels themselves. So at the moment, what we've done workshops with them on economic models of mussels, and we've done the swimming part. We're just waiting on the government for the permits part. The kind of dual side of this project is a swimming and diving project. So Louise is sat on the end there. In the orange, she's one of our swimmers and divers, so she's actually teaching as well, teaching a kid just below that, and basically she and Helena now as well, who actually I don't think is in this photo, but they basically learnt to swim, became swimming instructors themselves, which has been a really big thing because there's no female swimming instructors in this area. So last year we qualified the first 5 ever female swimming instructors in our area, which is really important in terms of representation in the swimming space and being able to break those stereotypes, those traditional gender roles, so that more young girls see other women in control, like as a teacher in the pool and attend swimming lessons. And we have seen an increase in little girls coming to swimming, which is amazing as a result of the women teaching. Those women are now,
Francesca, that's got to have huge ripple effects throughout the entire community, though. Just like if there's an existing fear of the ocean that you've talked about before, and you're seeing kids learn how to swim and then possibly go into the ocean, that's got to have just profound impact.
Massive. So we had, like, pre this, we had a swimming class, like swimming classes of 4 to 18-year-olds, and that's still going on. But we noticed there was a massive drop off when girls basically reached puberty level, which is why we launched the surveys to understand what was going on, what those barriers were. And one of those is role models, lack of role models. And that's really where that project was kind of born from. So we got funding from an agent called Daughters for Earth last year, and they funded Louisa and Helena to also go through their swimming and their swimming instructors. And now literally last week, like it timed perfectly with Paddy Women's Dive Day, they did their open water qualifications. And the next conversation is obviously around doing their advanced and what they want in terms of like their diving careers. And that will lead into science collection by women as well in the area, and breaking down massive gender barriers. And these women are also teaching every week upwards of like 100 kids how to swim. So the impact is massive because there's such a fear of the ocean because, as I said, we live on the wild coast. Unfortunately, we've had a lot of drownings, and that means that people are scared of the ocean and therefore do not interact with it unless they're harvesting food from it. So there's no kind of emotional attachment in terms of like let's protect and let's conserve and like that kind of like enjoyment from just enjoying it, because people are lacking swim skills to actually be able to do that. And so the swimming is a massive barrier that I don't think enough marine NGOs talk about, to be honest, because if you're going to run a marine protected area and that marine protected area is going to be locally led, you need a community with a skill set to be able to do that successfully. And swimming is an absolute key skill to be able to collect data and collect that data through diving, through snorkeling, through swimming. And so swimming is like such an important part of what we do, and bringing the kids to the ocean and inspiring that, wow, the ocean's amazing, that passion that is going to create your future ocean guardians, your future ocean conservation champions, our interns that we have. So yeah, so it all kind of links together. I think I've actually got some slides here. So this is the women like learning to swim and then becoming swimming instructors, and then this is them doing their qualifications last week. With Yoshko, who's our PADI instructor. He's been amazing. He volunteered his time with us to train the women, which has been incredible. And then I think I've got another slide. Yeah, this is about the aquaculture project, the meetings that we've had with government, and going through kind of the process of planning and all the rest of it. So it's been a long old journey, and to be honest, it's really exciting to see where this project will go. And I think the moment that we can get that gear in the water for the aquaculture project, that's going to be a really big turning point. And with the mussels as well, you can essentially sink and start to grow, like plant that spat every month, and then you can harvest every month. So after that initial growth period, you essentially have income on a monthly basis consistently. So it's a very sustainable income source as well as a food source. So yeah, in terms of like gender equity, you've also got that economic empowerment piece. So this is the first women's owned business in the area that is economic empowerment for women. According to our surveys, most women have to depend on their male counterparts to give them budget for menstrual products, to give them budget for contraception. Contraception generally isn't up to the women because they don't have money to be able to go into town to be able to get the contraception. So along with this comes bodily autonomy and all these other different things that just kind of demonstrates how holistic marine conservation is, and how it's just not linear. You can't just think about corals, for instance, even though the corals are such an important part of it. It actually links to like food security and women's role and all of these different things that come into it. And that's really where Love the Oceans comes into it as well, because we really try and think about these things in a holistic way that brings in all these different elements and all these different people, and all, because the more diverse your stakeholder base is and the more diverse the opinions are of, well, the people are that bring the opinions into the project, means that you're going to have a more successful project, because everyone has a different life experience and has different ideas and all that kind of stuff. So these kind of projects are really hopefully set up for success with the diverse stakeholder groups that we have and diverse input.
I'm just a little speechless, but we need more of you around the world.
Actually, something I should say is, which you touched on earlier as well, is that we design our, like the idea with Love the Oceans, I named it Love the Oceans because it was generic, and I had this lovely, beautiful idea when I was 20 of being like, oh, we'll replicate it around the world. But actually what we want to do is design it as a conservation strategy, like a jigsaw puzzle, and other NGOs and other conservationists around the world, not just NGOs, individual conservationists, government, whatever, can take parts of that jigsaw and fit it into their own jigsaw, so it can be replicated, scalable by other people, not necessarily just us. And Love the Oceans can act as a consultant on that, but we actually have no intention to replicate that ourselves unless we got some crazy grant from somewhere. But I mean, like, really, we're looking at wanting to be able to document successes and failures, what worked, what didn't, and then other people be able to apply that. If they think one of our projects could work where they are, they can reach out and we can check that, because that's the kind of global conservation and collaborative effort, collaboration, not competition, that we believe in. So yeah, for anyone watching, then please do reach out if you have similar projects.
Lovetheoceans.org. Yes.
I
mean, and that is part of the purpose of even this Women in Diving initiative, is amplifying, women's voices and the work that women are doing. And I'm just so happy that you were able to join us today and talk about the work that you're doing. And it's just incredible. And hopefully people are walking away with like a better understanding of how like the holistic system. Like you said, I think you did a perfect job connecting all the dots and answering, like, you did a great job. If you go to lovetheoceans.org and watch her COP26 video, Jessica does an amazing job at using the question why, like why are things happening? And if you do this in your own area to really understand the problem and where to start, she does a really good exercise and how you could do that yourself. But it's so interesting to understand, like you said, it's not just the coral. It's all of the factors that we've talked about today that play into a healthy community. Patty talked about, we want healthy dive communities, but it's a healthy local community that's creating a healthy ocean, a balanced ecosystem that creates, that has a ripple effect globally. So, Francesca, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your wonderful story. And I wish you the best of luck going forward.
Thank you so much for having us.
Touch base. We'll have to do another one of these in a year, and we'll see how things are going.
Yes. Yeah. Hopefully there'll be lots of updates.
Yeah. And one quick more, just so people know, if you do want to join Francesca and Love the Oceans, they have awesome expedition program that you can do from 10 days to 5 weeks, right? Something like that.
Yeah.
And you can and help them with their work, which is really cool. And that's the ultimate diving superpower. So you should go check it out.
Yes. Please do.
All right. Did you want to say anything else before we close it out today?
No, I think that's it. No. Thank you very much for having me. It's been so fab to talk to you.
Thank you. And thanks to everyone around the world joining us today. We hope you enjoy it, and we'll see you next time. Happy diving.
Thank you.